Hey, this is Rich, Tennessee Homestead. We talk a lot about pasture management when we're dealing with cattle and livestock. And it hit me the other day and looking around at some of the uh, farms that I've seen in this immediate area made me realize that while a lot of folks get the concept of pasture management, are they really paying close attention to how it all works in reality and how to make sure that their pastures are being well maintained by their cattle, and also to make sure that you're getting the most out of your land. So that's what we're going to talk to you a little bit about today. So stand by. Here we go. A little bit about pasture management. Now I'm going to utilize cattle, but it also applies to goats and sheep and just about any other kind of grazing animal we got out there, including pigs, if they're a grazer. So one of the things that I've seen a lot of is overgrazing in pastures. This is hard on your soil. It is hard on your grass. It's going to lead you to have to fertilize and to treat the soil more, and it just increases the cost of your operation straight across the board. So with anything else on a homestead, what you need to do is plan your pastures and your paddocks, how you're going to rotate your stock. One of the big expenses out there for running pasture land is water source. Okay? Now you'll see a lot of people throw a great big stock pond out and right there, well, they got their water source. Yeah, they do. They also have a way to get in there and cool off in the summer and stand in the mud and the water for hours on end to stay cool. And of course, then you get to pay to treat hoof rot, assorted diseases such as that, caused by these cattle standing in water. Not a good idea. Okay? You want the cattle to have water to drink. You don't want them playing in the water. A couple of things goes on there. I've seen young calves get drowned in stock ponds. I've seen regular cows sink down into the mud to the point that they end up drowning themselves in a stock pond. If the subsurface of the stock pond isn't solid enough to support their weight, all assorted little things. And along with hoof rot and stuff of this nature that seems to come along with it. You do not, I repeat, you do not want to give your cattle access to a stock pond. Okay? Not a good idea. Now, is it a bad idea to have a stock pond on your property? No, it's not. Okay, you can use it as a water source for your livestock. You just don't want them swimming. All right, it's not a pool. Okay. So when you're laying out your pastures, that is where the big key comes in. Okay, you want to start off there at your water source. Now, like we covered, you don't want them in that stock pond. So what you're going to want is a pump assembly going into a trough. Your ideal system would have close to your barn, you would have your water trough fed from a small pond. Okay? And you would want to have a paddock system set up to where you can move your cattle from one paddock back to the water source, from the second paddock back to the water source. Now, rectangular layouts with an alleyway is one of the best for that, where you lay out your perimeter in a hard fence system and then run an alleyway in between them where whatever paddock they're in, you can open up that particular gate and allow them access into that alleyway to get back to that water. It's nothing wrong with that. Okay, they'll walk quite a ways to get to water. Okay, and because they know where it's at, and they come up and get it. Good place to keep your mineral blocks and things of this nature. You know, it makes it easier for you to maintain that stuff because your bags of mineral are usually stored in your barn. Things of this nature. So that is a good way to run it. If you have kind of an oval shaped piece of land, you might want to do it like a pie shape where each paddock goes back to a main corral system where that water tank is at. Okay. If you try to plumb in water to each and every paddock or a movable water system, it's going to create extra work for you and extra expense. No need to do that. Put it in a corral. Let the cattle have access from every paddock back into that. Now, you do not want them having access from one paddock to the next paddock, all right? Because they're going to take advantage of it. If they're starting to get finished up with this one paddock, they'll go get themselves a drink and come back and go, oh, this looks better over here. Let me go eat this. You want them to where the food is here. Here's the gate. You come out to get in the alleyway, go get your drink, and come on back. And they will do that, all right? And you can even do it in such a fashion to where you cross fence using like a polywire fencing system to where you can move them through that paddock and leave it open back to that gate. Okay? As long as the paddock's not too big. Because here's the thing. When you move cattle, and I'm going to give you the shortcut, and this old boy down the road here could learn something from this. If you take your cattle and you've opened them up to where they can get to fresh grass. Okay? Usually about 3.5 hours, those cattle should have grazed enough to be ready to lay down, take a nap, go sit in the shade, take life easy. They're full. Within that first 3 hours hitting that new paddock. If you go out there at 3 hours and they're still grazing like crazy, and you come back and check them at 4 hours and they're still grazing like crazy, and so forth, then you need to take a hard look at the paddock they just came off of and understand these cows are hungry and they're trying to fill those rumens. That simple. They're hungry, which means they didn't get enough off of that last paddock. You need to figure out why. Is your paddock too small for the number of cattle you have out there? Either adjust your paddock size or adjust the number of cattle you got. These are just little tips. Means you having to check on your cattle. And yeah, you do. If you're going to move them every day into a fresh paddock, make sure that they're not standing there grazing all day long. I prefer a paddock layout to where I can run polywire fencing to divide it off, where I can run them into the first section, and then I can take that fence down and let them into the second fence, and I can put that fence back up, okay, and re-energize it. Here's why. I don't want them going back into that other paddock on their way back to get a drink of water and stuff of this nature. So yeah, it's going to cost you a little extra in gates and so forth, but you want to try to lay it out to where they're not going back through where they've already grazed. Because if you are grazing it right, they should only knock the top half of that grass off. That's it. Just the top half. Okay? If they're grazing it lower than that, one, it's going to take a lot longer for that paddock to recover. Okay? They're not getting any extra nutritional value out of it by eating that thing down to the dirt. Matter of fact, they get less. And you want that. I always used as a rule of thumb, I'd walk out, and the way I pretty much knew that my paddock was about ready for cattle again was it was back up to its original height, all the leaves were pointed, it's ready to go. So I can cycle them back on there faster. And if you can cycle them on faster, that's fine. Try to keep in mind, only let them eat half that grass. Okay, you want to keep those cattle moving. I've seen guys who have took a limited number of cattle and used them for mob grazing, which is really a good way to go. And that is that they can more even distribution of manure. They trample in the excess organic matter into the soil better because you have a lot of cattle on a small section. But sometimes that requires moving them more frequently. Okay, so, a little extra work, but it's beneficial to your pastures. If you're trying to rebuild your soil, then that's the way you're going to want to do it. Move them probably twice a day, okay? Because you want them in a tight area to where they're really mixing organic matter and their droppings into that soil by walking on it, stomping on it, yada, 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 okay? And it helps improve your organic matter because, let's face it, that dying organic matter laying there on that surface of the soil, one, it helps you retain moisture in your soil, which spurs new growth. Two, microbial life loves it, and it turns into a little smorgasbord farm. You're drawing in more good microbial life, and it's helping to fertilize and to restore your pasture. So mob grazing is a very good idea. But sometimes, if you're not running enough cattle and so forth, I got a fly driving me nuts, you need to watch the size of the paddock. But you really, once you get a feel for your paddocks and your cattle and know that, okay, I can give them this much room and they're going to pretty much have that ready to go in a 24-hour period. So 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'm going to have to get out here and move these cattle again, or 7 o'clock or whenever you're doing it. But then also watch, and this tells you the nutritional quality of your pasture. Are these cattle eating longer than they should when I put them on that new grass? All right. Now, I've had some guys, and it's worked well for them, where they've let the cattle backtrack through what they've already grazed to get to water. And their argument is it helps, again, with the putting down organic matter and spreading out manure and things of this nature. I can't argue with that. Okay, I've seen the results. It does work. Will they graze you down sometimes a little tighter? Yeah. They'll stop and see something that they like and grab a couple bites of it as they go back out to the paddock that they were working on. So either way really works. Having them backspace through a paddock, you can usually get by with fewer gates and things of this nature. You can cut down the size of your alleyway that you have to have, things of that nature. So, and there's a lot of plans out there for it. But my suggestion would be, wherever your barn's at, set up your water source and your corral there. Okay, that's where you want them going back for things like feed and water and minerals. Okay, get them used to going into that corral. And like I told you in another video, get them the habit of them going into that corral for good stuff. Then when you actually have to work the cattle out of that corral, they're used to going in there and you're not having a tough time running them into that corral. Okay, so cattle sometimes have the tendency to want to do anything and everything but what you want them to do. Okay, so be advised. And if they think good things come to them for going back in there, not a problem. And a lot of times you can go out in the paddock and walk the whole herd back into the corral at one time, and they think, oh, good, I was ready for a drink of water anyway, and they just go right along. So when you're laying out your land, that's the important part. Look at what infrastructure is there, and how can you utilize that to lay out your paddocks to get your pastures right. I can't stress to you enough that pasture rotation is critical. I've heard guys talk about the one bite process where you don't want them taking more than one bite of the grass in any given area because the second bite takes it down too low. And that's pretty much my stance is, as long as, if I've got 8 inches of grass out there, or 12 inches of grass, I want them to stop at 6 inches. Okay? And if that means me going out there and taking a look and go, oh, they can pretty good, it's got this grazed down to where as far as I want them to go with it, I'll open up the other paddock and go ahead and move them forward. You will find that if you don't take it down any lower than that, you want to keep that in that adolescence height. If you don't let them graze it down any farther than that, it recovers very quickly. Okay, and if they come back through there and start hitting that again and knock that stuff down to where it's 4 inches out of the dirt, it's going to take it a while for that paddock to recover. And then you're going to possibly be in a situation of, okay, I've ran them through the paddock, so I need that paddock back, and it is not ready yet. Okay? So, answer to that is, if you got hay on hand, you can take that and run them into the corral, give them a little feed, a little hay, try to keep them entertained in there for a bit while that pasture recovers, because if you keep putting them onto a pasture that's not ready, they're going to keep knocking it down deeper and deeper. And pretty soon you're going to be overgrazed, and then you're really going to have a feeding issue, depending on the acreage. Okay, if you're running 100 acres worth of pasture, you're in pretty good shape. You can put in enough paddocks to keep yourself busy and not have to worry about stuff like that. If the average guy running 20, maybe 30 acres, you're going to have to pay attention to what you're doing and how many head of cattle you're running. Okay? And that's going to take some trial and error based on your homestead. What works in one spot isn't necessarily going to work the same in the other. The principle's the same. Okay, the principles are pretty much tried and true. How fast you're going to have to move those cattle, things of this nature, that's what varies. The big secret to running cattle and managing pasture is watch how long those cattle graze once they get into that new paddock. If they are eating the way they should out of the first paddock and you move them into the second paddock, and within about 3 hours you start watching cattle go curl up somewhere, get comfortable, take a little siesta, lay around chewing the cud, whatever, you've got it about right on your timing for pasture move. Okay? If they're out there grazing for half the day nonstop, they didn't get the nutrients that they need. You might want to take a sample, find out what nutrients are in that grass. You may have a little fertilization issue, something of that nature. Does that mean go out and go down to the co-op and buy a bunch of fertilizer? Not necessarily. It may mean go ahead and use that as a sacrifice pasture. If all the rest of them look good, run them back into that, kind of mob graze that thing out, let them graze it down a little lower, let them stomp it in a little more, and then keep them off it for a while, let that manure work into the soil and help to fertilize it. So there's some suggestions for paddocks. Like I said, your best bet, put a corral by a barn, put your water source in there. If you're using a stock pond to water your animals, put a pump in that stock pond, pump the water into your troughs. Do not let those cattle into those stock ponds. Biggest mistake most people make. Guarantee you're going to lose a calf sooner or later. Guaranteed you may lose a cow sooner or later. And guaranteed you're going to be treating cattle for hoof rot. All right? Why put yourself through that? Okay? Pump the water into a trough. Get them used to going into that corral area that you built your head gates and all that off of. You got your corral set up, your working pen set up, and so forth, coming off that main corral. Lay out your paddocks either into a pie shape where they can have access back to that corral area from every pasture. Usually you can do that with a little semicircle open area and gating between your paddocks. You can use an alleyway if it's a more rectangular layout, to where you have a little alleyway running between your paddocks that you can open a gate and they can go through that gate and go back into that corral. All assorted plan layouts like that. There's truckloads of plans out there. Just put your water source up where you get them into that corral where they're normally fed and so forth. It's also a nice spot to hay them in the wintertime because wherever they're getting their hay at, they're going to leave you a lot of manure. Okay, and you can get out there with the front loader. Once you run them back out to the pasture, scrape all that out, make yourself a nice compost pile. In good shape. So I hope that helps a little bit. Went a little bit longer than I wanted to, but that's how you rotate animals around, guys. Don't let that grass get chewed down. Okay, the nutrients is up in the top of that. First half of that plan is what really keeps your cattle fed. All right, don't let them get down any deeper into your grass than that. If you do, you're slowing yourself down. You're slowing down the regrowth of your grass. Why do that? You want that grass back up and ready to go as quickly as it can so that you have the option of rotating it around more. You may find if you have good pasture and good pasture management, you may go, hey, I could probably throw another 5 or 6 head out here and run them with this group I've got now because my pastures are doing that well. All right. You can be way ahead of your county averages with proper pasture management, and your livestock will look a heck of a lot better. Okay. Like I said, it takes you getting out there in that pasture with those cows. Watch what they're doing. Like I said, the big secret. If you move into a fresh paddock and they graze more than 3 to 3.5 hours, understand they were hungry when they moved. You don't want them that hungry. All right, 3.5 hours worth of grazing. You want them cattle laying up, taking life easy. Okay. Otherwise, you're going to have to speed up your rotation a little bit. This is Rick, Tennessee Homestead. Hope you guys found this useful. If you have any questions and so forth, throw it down in the comments. We will get them answered for you. And I hope you found this something you'll be able to apply. We'll talk to you later. Love you guys and appreciate you.